¿Qué tal? I'm Antonio Tijerino, host of the Fritanga podcast by the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. Today's episode is one I've been looking forward to for a long time because it's with someone I've collaborated with, admired, and absolutely adore. He's a force of talent, heart, and vision whose creativity stretches across film, literature, theater, societal impact, and even music. El único, Alberto Ferreras. You might know Alberto as the creator of one of HBO's longest-running series, Habla, which centered everyday Latino voices when few others would, or from his work on Somos, the video installation at the Molina Family Latino Gallery at the Smithsonian. Or maybe you know him as the author of B as in Beauty, a novel that challenged beauty standards, championed self-love, and is currently being adapted for television after being translated into multiple languages. He's also behind the powerful theatrical work Hamlet in Harlem, or The Miracle, and American Latinos, 1935 through 1945, a stunning visual archive reclaiming Latino presence in American history. But what makes Alberto special isn't just the breadth of his work, it's the big beating heart behind it all. His stories aren't just entertaining, they connect us to each other, to ourselves, and to the complex layered beauty of our Latinidad. Alberto has worked across mediums and across cultures, weaving stories that are witty, thought-provoking, and deeply human. He even translated a Madonna song for her world tour, thought about making a living in music, and a bruja talked him out of it with very sage advice that impacted his entire career. That's Alberto. One moment he'll have you laughing out loud, next reflecting deeply on who we are. This episode is about the spiritual power of art to heal and unify, as well as inspire and mobilize. It's about creating our own narrative at a time when others are trying to write it. But it's ours. It's ours as Latinos, and Alberto is one of our scribes. So let's fritanga. With Alberto Ferreras, the most talented person I know.
Do you say that? One of these days I'm going to believe you.
Across all of these different genres, all of these different platforms, just one of the most beautiful people I know. And this is going to be airing as we kick off Pride 2025, World Pride, right here in D.C. in the 202.
Yay. All right. Woohoo.
Are you going to come in for it?
I will be back in New York probably on June 6th. So I don't know. Because Pride starts in June 1st, correct?
Pride Month does, yeah. And we're doing
Yes.
a charla and other activities to celebrate this wonderful moment for our community, just in terms of the great contributions, but also just the great presence of the LGBTQ plus community that we value and need to move us forward. It's just such a moving moment for us during Pride whenever we do our activities, because we're trying to listen as well. One thing's celebrating, but another thing's actually listening to our queer familia. And for an old straight guy, it really is a moment for me to learn and have a greater understanding, but it's not going to increase my level of appreciation because that's already turned up to 11 out of 10.
I've never met an ally more ally than you. Seriously, I'm not making it up. My only issue sometimes is that I feel like in the last few years there's been such there's a big push to separate us and our causes and our beliefs, even within the LGBTQIA, WWW, whichever you want to call it, community. We just have to keep focusing on what keeps us together, what we have in common. And then, of course, accept our differences. But the focus should be what we have in common and how to treat each other with respect and compassion and empathy.
We have everything in common.
Absolutely, exactly. That's the whole point. Yeah, but you can say, well, the trans community has, very specific needs and issues and a history, and of course it does. But if we want to move together as a community, we do have to stick. We gotta support each other.
and stick up for each other, because
Yeah.
right now the trans community is under assault.
Big time.
And we all have to stand with the trans community right now. And that includes the other elements of the GLBTQ plus community.
Absolutely. And you know something, I always say, I say this a lot. I say your neighbor's problems are your problems. And I think it's true. And it's true not just for, LGBTQ communities, but for any other, group that feels, oh, well, they're not coming after me, so it's okay. No, brother, they will come after you. They'll come after anyone.
Well, but see, that's the thing is, I don't even think of it as separate. The LGBTQ plus community is part of our community.
Yeah.
And if they're coming after the queer community, they're coming after, like you said, all of us.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when we get divided within. What's beautiful about the Latino community is that we are everyone and everyone is us.
Yeah.
In every single way. And that's the part where it gets beautifully complex. That's why we do our identity charlas. And that's also why we have our representation across the board. It's interesting. When we have had people representing, for instance, food insecurity, we had people from the LGBTQ plus community as part of that work. And I remember someone coming up to me going, I didn't know this was a pride event. And I said, it's not. These are issues that we're all dealing with.
They're your neighbors.
This is a representative of our community.
Exactly.
You don't have to slot someone that just because, it happens to be Black History Month that you're going to have an Afro-Latino on there. No, an Afro-Latino represents our community every single day. And so many other communities. And it's the same thing with my kids that are Asian Latino. We are all a complex, beautiful mix. And that's the beauty of the intersectionality of our community. And so you have always done an interesting perspective and approach to that intersectionality and that identity, especially when you add immigrant to all the other intersections. Can you talk a little bit about how you've, excavated or explored those aspects through your work?
Okay, so here's the deal, and this is how it all started, and stop me if it gets boring. As you know, I was born in Spain, and then I was raised in Venezuela. And so I'm 100% Venezuelan. But at home, it was Spain somehow. Like my father, my mom, what we ate, it took a very long time. Now I'm a big arepa eater, but for the longest time, that was not necessarily what my mom would cook, because she learned to cook from her mom, who was this fabulous lady, Celestina, my abuela from El Escorial. So same thing goes for my father. My father was a very international gentleman. But they grew up in the Spanish culture. So we moved to Venezuela, and the Spanish culture is very much part of me.
How old were you when you got to Venezuela?
I was 4.
Oh, dude, you're so Venezuelan. Exactly. You're the most Venezuelan person I know. 4.
And yet, but when you have that switch, and hopefully somebody listening to this will say, yes, that's true. It's and in Venezuela, people. I love Venezuela. Don't get me wrong, but at the time it wasn't it wasn't chic to be a Spaniard. It was a little bit of a, if you were a Spaniard, there was a little bit of a friction, so to speak, and so that wasn't something that you necessarily wanted to share with anybody, but you carry that with you. It's like it happens in the U.S. as well sometimes. Mm-hmm. It happens now being Venezuelan in the U.S. I'm sure that some people, for very good reasons, if they ask them, where are you from, they're not going to tell you they're Venezuelan, because they've been speaking, they've been saying horrible things about Venezuelans in the media, and they claiming that everybody belongs to El Tren de Aragua. Anyway.
Which is, since that is abhorrent.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. And that sweeping, that everyone suddenly is lumped in as being part of this gang, that when Venezuelans have so much pride and are facing so much tragedy back in the homeland, they have no choice but to come to the United States or other places for their own safety and for their family safety, the same thing that we would all do. And to be treated this way, with that tremendous amount of potential that you're bringing and talent that you're bringing to the United States and to other countries, it needs to be welcomed and appreciated and supported. And this narrative needs to be offset right now. And to me, that's part of what we all have a responsibility to do.
I think it's very sad what's happening in the U.S. Because there's a lot of hardworking people that are being treated, without respect that they deserve. Anyway, so back to the story. I'm growing up in Venezuela, just like any other Venezuelan boy, and I moved to the U.S. when I'm 24 because I wanted to study television, and the big surprise was to find Latinos in the U.S. I didn't know, and I was very well informed. I was a journalist, but my perception of the U.S. came from film and television, and there were no Latinos in film and television in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Just a few. It was like Charo, Eric Estrada. That was pretty much it. So I didn't know anything about the relationship of Puerto Rico and the continental U.S. I didn't know anything about Chicanos. The first time I saw a movie that talked about what it was like to be a Chicano, and I didn't quite understand it. It was La Bamba. I'm like, how come these guys, they look Mexican and they talk with the accent, but they're in the U.S. and they speak English? What's the deal with that? Nobody, because it was not in the media, I didn't know much about it. So when I moved to the U.S., and somebody told me, basically, welcome, you are a Latino, so go play with them. I was like, I need to understand this community that now I'm a part of. And that's how I became fascinated with this diversity and how, in spite of our diversity, we get along. When you and I met, I'm like, and where are you from? And you're like, Nicaragua, and you told me your story, and I was like, there you go. Now I'm going to learn a lot of things about Nicaragua that I didn't know. But there's an instant empathy with all the people that remember their past, which I think it's also part of being Latino. That there's an ancestry that you're proud of also, regardless of where it came from.
I remember that. It was over 20 years ago, Papa. And I remember at one point, you even put me on one of your Habla series. After watching it, you were like, you want to be on it? And I remember sitting in like the waiting room, and it was like Soledad O'Brien, Lin-Manuel Miranda, our good friend Lisa Quiroz, rest in peace to that beautiful soul, and Charo, that an icon that we all grew up with. And we talked about our being immigrants or being accepted into this country. And I talked about my mom, rest in peace, and her swearing in ceremony and how I was a part of that. And yeah,
it was beautiful.
We've known each other for a long time.
But let's explain. Some people might not know what Habla is. So this is the deal. When I first moved to the States, I worked for MTV for a couple of years, and then I moved to HBO, where I worked for more than a decade. And while I was at HBO, I somehow managed to convince my boss that we needed to create, first there was going to be a campaign that later became a documentary series, that we needed to create a show where we would invite just regular Latinos to talk about what it was like to be Latino in the U.S., because I felt like that was not a conversation that we were having. And I'm talking about 2003, when Spanglish was nowhere to be found. Yep. Advertising companies were afraid of using Spanglish in campaigns, even though any Latino in the U.S. speaks Spanglish. It was frowned upon. You remember those days. Yeah. So in that sense, we pioneered. So we did a few of these documentaries where we would have anyone telling us chancleta stories or taco
I remember
stories.
Yours. You were like Venezuela, and how you have to say words wrong in order for people to understand?
Claro, porque, you know.
Do a little bit of that. It was hilarious. I'm supposed to say Connecticut?
So what happened is that because I came from Venezuela, people would ask me where I was from, and I would say Venezuela, and people would hear Minnesota. I don't know why. And I'm like, no, I'm not from Minnesota. Do I sound like someone from Minnesota? And so then the first time I traveled to Los Angeles, I was like, you would have to mispronounce the names of every neighborhood basically to find your way around. So if you were going to Los Feliz, you would have to learn to say Los Feliz. Otherwise, the taxi wouldn't take you there. Or words that I still I don't know how to say Sepulveda Boulevard in English. Because for me, that thing says Sepulveda, man. I don't know how to say it any other Sepulveda. I can't say it wrong. I can't. So,
and it's the best is the people that are like proposing that we eradicate Spanish from America, and it's like, well, what are you going to do with Orejon or Colorado,
Peñasco, Las Cruces? I mean, dude, what are we going to call everything? And also, we have to anglicize it your way. I mean, don't get me started.
Florida.
So we did Habla with regular people. I was one of them. And then we did celebrities. And actually, you, Jose Antonio, you were in our first celebrity special because
I snuck in there.
Oh no, man, you are. You're an idol. You're an icon. And in your show, you're absolutely right. We had Lisa Quiroz. We had Rita Moreno. We had Lupe Ontiveros, who I adore.
Yeah.
May she rest in peace. She was. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't it happen to you that you fall in love with characters that remind you of the people that you love? And Lupe was never like the tall blonde. Lupe, I don't know if anybody listening doesn't know who Lupe Ontiveros is. You should look her up. But first of all, because she kills Selena in the movie, which is something that she had so much fun with that. Not killing anybody, of course, but with the fact that she would be recognized as the murderer of Selena in the movie.
Oh, my Lord.
But Lupe was incredibly intelligent, talented, and she had to fight so hard to be recognized because she was not, she didn't look like Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, what a talent, though. We've had so much talent, and I just remember during the Hispanic Heritage Awards and when you used to come, I've
been there repeatedly.
But you would always be so helpful, and when we were kind of stuck or somebody dropped out, you would always help us. Oh my goodness, they just played here, Los Amigos Invisibles.
Los Amigos Invisibles. I sent you Los Amigos Invisibles.
And you got them for us.
And Nela Rojas, the wonderful Nela Rojas. She's such
several
a
people.
Talented singer. Yes.
Yeah.
Mira, anytime you're stuck and you need like a last minute act, you let me know. I'll be more than happy to send you my friends.
You're the greatest act I know. So most people know my friend Alberto Ferreras as an award-winning filmmaker, writer, cultural storyteller, just a great presence. But what some of you might not know is that he worked with Madonna.
Oh, wow.
Yes, Madonna. You translated her song, What It Feels Like for a Girl, into Spanish for her international tour in the early 2000s. Can you tell us about that? Like, you've done everything, and you guys have to look this guy up and see who he's connected with. It's incredible. But Madonna is a whole nother level. I thought, that's a real icon.
That is the kind of thing that you do for your resume. Absolutely. So this is very funny, and I'm not promoting, however, I do talk about this particular adventure of working with Madonna in my show, in The Miracle, because it's a show about the how important music is to heal. But the story specifically with Madonna is that one day I was going home like really late. It was probably like a Wednesday, and a dear friend of mine, my friend Maria Oxy, called me up. And she said, hey, could you translate a song? And I'm like, not tonight. I'm very tired. And she's like, it's for Madonna. And I said, what time do you need it? I'm like, well, you're going to say no? And at the time, I had to run to the Virgin Megastore to buy the CD. It was in the year 2000. And I started listening to the song because Madonna had decided that she wanted to turn that song into a salsa number. Actually, it's like a lesbian salsa number, and include it in her tour. And they needed a translation. And they reached out to different people. But they apparently this is a standard procedure when you're looking for a translation of a song. You ask different people to see what they do with the song, because songs are tricky. They have to have the same metric, the same meter. They call it métrica in Spanish, meter. They have to have the same rhyme, más o menos, and they have to have the same meaning. Every verse has to have more or less the same meaning. So the song is called What It Feels Like for a Girl, and I translated that to Lo que siente la mujer. Why? Because it's the same number of syllables. What it feels like for a girl, that's 7 syllables. Lo que siente la mujer, 7 syllables. The rhyme is very close. Girl, mujer, there's not a lot of words in Spanish that end with "erl." So, what it feels like for a girl, and it'll be Lo que siente la mujer. And is it the same meaning? More or less. Madonna is a little bit of a 65-year-old girl. So I sent it, hoping that they would like it, but with no guarantee that she would use it, and she did. She took my translation and she traveled the world with that number, with that lesbian salsa number. The funny thing is that I was convinced that that's what I was going to do for a living after that. I'm like, imagine if I translated a song for Madonna overnight, I must be a genius. And I did the Latino thing. Instead of asking a career coach, I went to a psychic. I went to a bruja in New York. I swear to God, a psychic. And I told her, should I do this for a living? And the bruja, she put el tarot like in front of me, the cards, and she said, absolutely not. And I'm like, why? Are you crazy? I just work with Madonna. This is clearly what I was born to do. And she said, if you work with music, you will ruin the enjoyment of music, which is very important for you because music helps you heal. So if you turn it into a business, you will not have music when you need it. And Tony, that was the best advice. I don't know if she could talk to the dead or anything like that, but I can tell you that lady gave me the best advice ever, because it's very dangerous to turn what you love into a business, especially when it comes to the arts, and because the arts are there to help you heal.
Esa bruja should be a life coach to a lot of us. Give her a shout out.
She was.
¿Qué era su nombre?
Se llamaba Iris. She was wonderful. Then she stopped working porque, it works like that. Sometimes they have a connection with you.
She stopped working because she went into translating music.
She got into music translation. She
took your job with Madonna.
No,
I by Iris La Bruja.
I never met Madonna. I hate to say it. Everything was done by email. I'm very happy that that she liked my work, and but I didn't pursue a career in music. I decided to do other things, like the Habla Series or like projects.
And we're gonna talk about those other things. But shout out Iris La Bruja, because I went through that when I was in high school. My first job was working at a donut shop. And I've never eaten a donut since I was 15 years old. I loved them until I started working with donuts.
Oh,
yes,
my
it's the
God,
truth.
Tony, really?
I was like, oh my goodness, if I smell another donut. So La Bruja was right, and I'm glad that we have you in all these other areas that include music. So this, I'm really big on this because you and I have had so many conversations about identity and how personal your identity is. And you've done that through your work. So let me remember this right. For instance, I think through Habla, you've done that tremendously. You've presented different perspectives through Habla, and people should look that up wherever you can find Habla Series.
It's at Max.
In
if anyone has a Max, the service what used to be HBO Max, you can usually find Habla episodes.
But you really identify the different areas of Latinidad in this country. Like I said, including people that don't speak Spanish and feel excluded from the community, especially when they look a certain way and have a certain last name, and then feel as though they don't belong. And so ni de aquí, ni de allá, y ni de allá tampoco is happening all over. And then you also, I remember you wrote Be as in Beauty from the, can you talk about that book? Because you wrote it from the perspective of a woman.
So Be as in Beauty is a novel that I wrote that was actually, it got published in 2009. And the book is inspired actually by a real, not the whole story, a dear friend of mine who's a beautiful, curvaceous, voluptuous friend of mine. She went to do her taxes. You know, she was filing for her taxes, and she went to one of these places where they, you know, it's an anonymous, so to speak, tax filing place. And the lady that she was working with she looked at her, and she said, "Wow, with that body, you should be making a fortune." And my friend, you know, she's a big girl, so she was like, "What?" You know, first of all, like, why is this tax lady telling me that my body is, you know, that I should be making a fortune with my body? And second, like, what do you mean my body is so precious? Because for some people, you know, I'm too heavy. And the woman is like, no, if you want to make a fortune, just give me a call. And she gave her cell phone number written on a card. My friend never called this lady. My character calls this lady.
Okay, I was about to say, I'm glad your friend didn't call the pimp tax
tax madam. We call her the tax madam. But you see, for me, what was fascinating is weight is a huge issue for everyone in society. And years ago, I would say for women, now it's for everybody. Everybody's terribly afraid of gaining weight and not having the perfect body. So the idea that an imperfect body could be attractive to the point that somebody would tell you, oh, you can make a fortune with those curves. I thought that was fascinating. And it would be a fascinating journey to build up your self-esteem.
Now how much of this relates to you as a gay man, where you are someone's type, for instance,
exactly,
by having having curves, or you know, having certain attributes that are actually a positive.
Well, I am convinced that one of the things that inspired me to write the novel was the surge of the bear community in the gay community. You know, for many years, again, you know, the gay community is fabulous, wonderful, everything that you can imagine. But also there's a lot of concerns with the way you look and with fitting on that swimsuit, you know, and maybe shaving that back if it's too hairy and things like that. But then all of a sudden, this very fun group emerges within the gay community that are the bears that are like, I'm fat, yeah, and I like to wear a Speedo. Like, your back is extremely hairy, yeah, and some people like that. So I'm like, how can we transpose this to the heterosexual world? Because it happens, it exists. I know for a fact that women of all sizes have, you know, successful relationships, people who love them. There is a stigma in society, but not in the personal lives of people that own who they are and what they look like.
And everyone is beautiful, but it starts with you.
Yes.
Then it radiates.
Yes. So to go back to the novel, the book, I wrote the book in 2006. It took 3 years to come out because the publishing house was being acquired by another one. Finally came out in 2009 with Hachette Book Group. Then it came out in Spanish. Then it came out in Italian. Somebody is right now trying to turn it into a TV series. We'll see, because I think it's a great story. It's definitely, I'm proud of that book.
What I love about everything from Be As in Beauty to the Habla series and other things you've done to auditioning for Almodovar is that you'll bring an aspect of an American experience and you'll just present it in such a clever, entertaining, but poignant and I think profound way of addressing an issue. So in my mind, when I heard about this play and when you told me about it when you first wrote it, somebody that has an accent, who's going to appreciate an accent? The guy who put Selma Hayek and Penelope Cruz and Antonio Banderas and all these people in his movies. So let me see if I can audition for him because he won't make me have to lose my accent. I don't know. I just thought it was so clever, but those are things that we deal with in life every day, and you turned it into whether it's going for a job interview with a heavy accent or actually trying to do a different kind of interview to be a star. And how are you a star with an accent? But I just think it's clever the way you present it is all. I'm just giving you a lot of applause for the way you are very clever with how you present these very profound moments.
God bless you. Yes, I'll take the applause. I'm kidding. But the truth is that, and it happened with that play, my audition for Almodovar, but it also happened with a play that I did recently, which I'm very proud of. Is called Hamlet in Harlem, and it's an all Latino Hamlet, but it's an all Latino Hamlet. Not really. It's the story of an Anglo-Saxon filmmaker who wants to do an all Latino Hamlet, but he doesn't know enough about Latinos. He doesn't know enough about Harlem. He doesn't know much about Hamlet either, and they have this reading for an investor. The play is very interactive. They're constantly talking to the audience because he's basically doing this reading as a fundraiser, and it all looks improvised. But the truth is that what I'm constantly trying to do with that play or with something recent, my most recent show called The Miracle, which I'm in that show, is trying to build bridges so we stop being afraid of the other. We stop being afraid of what we've been told that the other is up to. So we connect cultures, so we see the humanity in both sides. My audition for Almodovar was very much about that. It was about humanizing the character of the actress who can't speak English properly, but she really wants to succeed. She wants to be discovered. Or in the case of Hamlet in Harlem, it's this guy who empathizes with the Latino struggle, but he's not informed, unfortunately. So he writes a screenplay that actually sucks, but then he allows the actors to rewrite it as they go. I think that's what the world needs now. And I don't want to sound like I'm singing a Burt Bacharach song, but what the world needs now is art that helps us understand each other, because there's a lot of forces that are trying to separate us.
Can you talk about The Miracle?
Of course, I would be thrilled to talk about The Miracle. So this is all, by the way, I am a very, very lucky person because later in life, when I started my career, I was probably 16, I started in theater, and I gave up on theater as years went by because it is very difficult to make a living in theater.
I thought you were going to say because Bruja Iris told
Bruja
you
Iris
to.
told me stay away from that. No. I mean, ask anyone who works in especially if you work in off Broadway or in non-commercial theater. If you want to tell the stories that you want to tell, and as a writer and as a director, I want to tell the stories that I want to tell, not necessarily do a remake of a Hollywood film. So after the pandemic, one of the blessings of the pandemic for me is that it brought theater back into my life. I joined the board of Theater for the New City with stage Hamlet in Harlem, and then a year later I had an idea that had to do with my experience with music, not the Madonna thing, but something else that happened to me when I was 5 years old. I was going to a Catholic school, and the nun, and we were rehearsing for the Christmas show, and the nun came up to me while we were singing, and she said, honey, just move your lips. Don't sing, just move your lips. And imagine what it's like for a 5-year-old to be told by a nun that you shouldn't be singing. That's like God coming down from heaven to tell you, shut the hell up. You know, nobody wants to hear you singing, buddy. Sorry, on your next reincarnation, you're going to be able to sing, not on this one. So 25 years went by, and I was in New York, and things were fine, but I was very depressed. I think I was feeling lonely. It was a very bad year for me. And I started going to therapy and everything. And then one night I couldn't sleep. I had such anxiety attacks that I went out and I ended up in a piano bar at 3 a.m. Marie's Crisis, actually, I think was the piano bar. And everybody was drunk but me. But I walked in and the piano player said, "What are you going to sing?" And I'm like, me? If he had asked me, "Can you sing?" I would have said, "No, I can't, because a nun told me when I was 5 years old, blah, 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 blah." But he said, "What are you going to sing?" And I chugged my vodka and I said something by Liza Minnelli.
Which one?
I sang, it's called "But the World Goes Round." You know,
give me a little bit of it right now.
Well, it goes, sometimes, oh, wait, that's the wrong key. Sometimes you're happy and sometimes you're sad, but the world goes round. And sometimes you lose every nickel you had. Ooh, but the world goes round. It was the song that I was singing to myself every day because I was, again, going through a rough patch. And at the end of the song, they liked it. Of course, there was a bunch of drunk people in a bar at 3 a.m. Who cares? But it's not that they liked it. I loved it. I loved it so much that I was embarrassed to admit how much I was liking it. And it was the most conscious decision I've made in my life. I said, I have to figure out where I can sing twice a week, because I think that if I start singing twice a week, I'll be able to stop going to therapy twice a week. and it did. It worked. I would go to the craziest karaoke bars in New York City. In the mid-90s, there were not a lot of places. There was a very, very creepy place in Chinatown that I loved. It was one of those bars where there was always an inch of water in the bathroom floor. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
How could a place that was so creepy be so beautiful and so nourishing? I would get there. They had that place. It's still around, I understand. It's called Weenie's, but it's not in the same location. At Weenie's, they had a 500-page book of songs, but 498 pages were in Chinese. Only 2 pages were in English. And the only song that I could sing there was Over the Rainbow. But I was doing a fine job because at some point the owner of the bar decided that I was not allowed to sing it alone. I had to sing it with her. So I could only sing it alone if she was not in the bar. If she walked in and I was halfway into the song, she would make them stop and take it from the top so she and I could sing together. And I know that this sounds ridiculous, but it was an honor because she didn't do this for everybody. She only did it with me. And it made me understand that there was something about singing that was magical, that was actually having an impact in my mood, an impact in the way I related to people. And the most important thing, singing doesn't mean that you want to have a career in the music industry. Singing is something that you do just like eating. You eat because it's better to eat than to watch somebody else eat, right? So it's better to sing than to just listen to somebody else singing. It doesn't matter how good they are.
And it's a form of expression.
Absolutely.
And connectivity. And let's face it, you went from singing Liza Minnelli to singing her mom's most popular song in terms of Judy Garland.
Absolutely.
So you kept it in the family.
I kept it in the family, the Garlands and the Minnellis. Yes.
That's a great story. So tell me more about The Miracle, though.
So The Miracle is somebody called it a one-man show, and I refuse to call it that because I think it's a dialogue with the audience. And it's the story of how I learned that music could transform my life. And I talk to other people, and it's like a wild, it can get a little wild. I ask people to get up and sing. It's a lot of fun, and it's the kind of show. I think it's essential, since there's no guarantee that art is going to pay your rent. You should do the projects that make you happy. You should do the art that you want to do. You shouldn't be doing what they've told you that is going to make you famous, because there's no guarantee you're going to be famous.
Whenever you're doing something for a material return, it's not going to be as gratifying as doing it for your own self-expression, connection to others, sharing a moment, which is what you get when you're singing or playing. My son is a musician. My daughter paints amazing paintings and drawings, and my youngest is a little bit of both of the other two and is a great writer. So the fact that they will always have this form of expression, no matter what else they do, and it translates into everything else. Am I going to be nervous about making a presentation in front of somebody when I used to play in a band and get in front of hundreds of people or thousands of people? No. So it translates. Your creativity is such that you're not afraid to tackle any kind of project because you're resourceful and creative and can think on your feet and everything else. So I believe that the arts feed into every other aspect of your life, including being a parent for me.
That is absolutely true. And not only that, and here's the big danger, and this goes back to my Madonna experience, if you decide that commercial success is going to confirm, it's going to validate what you've done, then you may end up hating what you love so much, what saved you, what nourished you, what prepared you to be a better person in so many other areas of your life.
Yeah, think about some of the great art that we have that was motivated by nothing else but expression. Think of Confederacy of Dunces
Yes.
by another John F. Kennedy, but it was published by his mom posthumously when she just found all of these things. And so many times you have music that was posted after someone had passed even. So their motivation was simply to sing. And when you think of the people that you see, the street performers, they're doing it as a form of expression. They're not doing it for the little bit of change that they're collecting. No, they have to sing. They have to dance. They have to play. They want an audience. It's as a form of interchange. That's what I think is interesting about performers, real performers, a sincere performer. Their currency is their performance, and they're able to connect with other people, or even if they do it by themselves. I've done that before, where I'm playing guitar by myself, sitting on my front stoop in the middle of the night, as a form of singing to the universe. And I do think that you get a lot back too when your audience is the entire universe.
Exactly what you're doing I think is what we all need to do. My struggle has been to figure out how to make theater part of my life without stopping my life because of theater. And it's been a very interesting journey. So usually when I do, of course, people like big Broadway shows, and they love explosions and people flying. That's not necessarily the theater I want to do. But I'm learning that there's a lot of people who are interested exactly in the type of theater that I'm doing. And going back to the music, this is kind of like deep and absolutely true. The last 3 times that music has made me cry was in the subway, because somebody was playing a guitar at the end of the hallway, and it was just so mournful and soulful that I couldn't help myself, and I started weeping. So you don't know who's listening to you when you're playing your guitar on your porch, and you think that, the creatures of the forest are listening. Maybe there's somebody who needs to hear your song, man, and they're enjoying it.
And we all need to hear your stories. And I do think there's an intimacy to how you tell your stories and how you present them. So in so many of our cultures, including ours, storytellers are kind of keepers of wisdom. And whether it's listening to your abuelitos to share stories over food or your parents, a lot of times how we navigate the world is shaped by those stories and that wisdom and how we view ourselves and our cultures. Did you have storytellers in your family, and was there a story that stuck with you? Because you seem to draw a lot of your influence from personal stories. In terms of your heritage, what are those stories that stuck out for you? And I can tell you, my mom used to tell me about Don Quixote and gave me that book when I was very young. I couldn't get through it, but I read elements of it that influenced me for the rest of my life. So what are some of those stories that influence you?
Well, I'm gonna, just because you're asking, my father was self-taught. Actually, he went to, I think he only made it to 5th grade or so. I mean, we're talking, in Spain during the Civil War. I mean, imagine how much education could a kid from a rural, village could get. So he was a very cultivated man, but self-taught. So the most precious thing that we had at home was a library. And my father was compulsive when it came to collecting books. So I got very lucky. I grew up surrounded by books. Some of them I shouldn't have. Maybe they were a little too intense for a child. But I was also very curious, and I was a good reader. So I did take advantage of my father's book collection. And I can tell you that my favorite novel of all time is 100 Años de Soledad. I think 100 Years of Solitude is a brilliant book that I think, God chose Garcia Marquez to tell that amazing story. But also, and this became a little bit of an obsession, and it still is, and it's been many years. There's an Argentinian writer called Jorge Luis Borges, who I think has been the biggest influence that I've had as a storyteller. The interesting thing with Borges is that it's like he imagined the future. Some of us think that he was a prophet because he has short stories that sound scarily, things that he wrote in the 40s that you can basically, you can think that he's talking about an iPhone when he talks about the Aleph, which is one of his most famous stories. So my father was a great storyteller and a world traveler. So I did learn a lot from him. But my mom is a storyteller as well. We grew up, those of us who are viejitos, we got lucky because that's how you kept the history of the family, by telling stories. My mom sometimes tells me the same story over and over, and I'm like, I'm sure I need to hear it again. I'm going to let her tell it, because I'm not going to say, yeah, you've told me that story 1,000 times. It doesn't matter. Let's hear it again, because I know you like to tell that story.
And that's all we have left. I mean, I lost my dad months ago, and I remember every story that he told me about the family or about him growing up or his experiences. And I lost my mom 28 years ago. And I tell my kids, their grandchildren that she never met, those same stories. And they know Abuela Mercedes, and they call her Abuela, even though they've never met her, and she died long before they were born. But those are precious, precious stories. And what's beautiful is, speaking of kids, I remember them watching a show on HBO on a Saturday morning, and I see your name pop up. It was an animation show, and so you're even storytelling to children.
I did. That's
El Gato,
El Perro y el Gato. For those of you who might remember, I had this very cool boss at HBO in those years. Her name is Elaine Merrill Brown. She's fabulous, and she was a big supporter of Latino initiatives. And we created an animated show that could be, if you were a Spanish-speaking kid, you would learn English, and if you were an English-speaking kid, you would learn Spanish. That was it. That was and I was one of the creators of that show. I'm so happy that your kids grew up watching quality television.
Told by their tío
Alberto.
Alberto.
Pero, do you know something? And I'm going to say this to you, first of all, because I admire so much what you do. And you have the energy and you know how to relate to young people, which is essential, because I feel like we got very lucky that we received a wisdom and an experience from our parents who survived very difficult events, economic events. In my family, the Spanish Civil War, then, migration, all these things. This needs to be passed to the next generation, so they learn from the things that from these hardships that our families had to deal with. I think it's essential that they know what we're going through. And sometimes I feel like there's so many distractions, and we're competing with phones and Instagram. So we have to make the effort to tell in my case, my nephews. I'm always the uncle who tells them the inappropriate stories, but somebody has to. I mean, they're not like that inappropriate. But, it's certainly, if somebody, was the son of a priest, I'm like, hey, and that was the father. Oh, yes, it was.
Luckily, that didn't make it to the animation show that my kids watched on HBO when they were little. But I do have to say this, though, Alberto, in respect to what children have gone through that we didn't go through, or our parents didn't go through, a pandemic.
Oh, yes.
That was terrorizing and killing people all around them. The issues of racial violence and all of these the homophobia, and it's pronounced when you also have to deal with social media that's amplifying it for good and for bad. Lockdowns in schools. I mean, we thought maybe there was going to be some kind of a bomb, and so we had bomb shelters before our generation, probably in terms of your parents' generation. But this is happening in schools. My son has gone through 3 lockdowns just this past year with active shooters, and my daughter as well, while there were fires going on at her college, while 3 active shooters were around. So I just have to also respect what young people are going through right now.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that, that technology has made it so difficult for us to be able to focus on one thing,
Yes,
just that in itself, it is challenging, and I'm not saying in any way that these stories are not being passed because kids are not interested. Quite the opposite. I think that we have to become better storytellers and
Exactly.
Take it seriously. It's like, okay, tonight we're not going to turn on the television. I'm going to tell you the truth about your Aunt Mildred, and I'm like, okay, I want to hear it. I think that it is very, very important that this family history is passed down.
We just have to adapt to how they want to hear it. And that's the problem when you're dictating to someone, to the audience, how you want to tell it. No, you have to work backwards from how the audience wants to hear it.
Exactly.
But maintain your integrity and your perspectives and your messaging. But if young people want to hear it in a split second on a reel, then create a better reel that's going to connect with them. But you still have the same message in it. Because young people, to me, are smarter. I always say, when you have a 15-year-old that have access to Wi-Fi and a device, they can reach more people than Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Cesar Chavez in their lifetimes combined, in a split second. So make sure that you are giving them every tool to be able to make an impact on this world, including in your industry, in the entertainment industry. I mean, everyone can create now. There's a democracy in creating. Everybody has access to a phone that can film something and tell a story. So I just have so much respect for youth and for you as a very young man. I appreciate you so much, Alberto. I adore you. I have for many, many years. I just have such an appreciation for you, and we need more content from you. We need more perspective from you in a way that brings us together, which you've always done. I also want to close with the Fritanga questions, which are how culture comforts all of us. And at a time that we, as Latinos specifically, have less access to healthcare, has less access to culturally relevant or language relevant healthcare providers, especially in the mental health space, have less access to money to be able to pay for some of these costs and resources and have stigmas attached to it. We have to depend on what we have available to us: music, storytelling, food, nature. So give me that: food, music, stories.
Listen, I'm a huge fan of Nina Simone.
Love her.
I'm a huge fan of a lady called Rocío Dúrcal, who was, I think I have something in common with Rocío Dúrcal. She was a Spaniard, but she grew up in Mexico. And she has a fabulous song called La Gata Bajo la Lluvia. Dude, if you're ever going through a trouble and you have your karaoke app with you, you sing that song and you feel instantly better. If you want to hear something crazy, if you want to bring somebody very interesting to your next award show, there's a group called Los Crema Paraíso that they do techno Venezuelan folklore. They're amazing, and I listen to that to their music all the time. I listen to a lot of jazz, believe it or not. And
what kind of jazz? I love jazz.
Old jazz. Do you know what I rediscovered? I don't know if you were a fan. There was a guy called Claude Bolling, Bolling, and he did all these albums where he would pair with another musician. He played the piano, and he would bring Jean-Pierre Rampal to play the flute, and then he would bring somebody else to play the trumpet. And Claude Bolling did really beautiful music. And I love the soundtracks of Nino Rota, the guy who did the music for the Fellini films. Love that stuff. And I can tell you that my favorite, this is a little Liza Minnelli-ish, my favorite film of all time is a movie called All That Jazz, which is the story of Bob Fosse, who told us his real story.
And it was a great series that was.
They did a series inspired on his life. It's called Fosse, Vernon Fosse. But that film, All That Jazz, it was directed by Fosse, and he very much presented his life. He tried to be as subjective about his life.
It's a great movie.
It's phenomenal. So if anybody has the chance to watch that film, or another movie that I watch compulsively, two more films that I watch compulsively are Blade Runner, because I think they imagine the future in a very interesting way. And I think that movie is deeper than just a sci-fi movie. And The Nights of Cabiria, which is a Federico Fellini film that Janet Maslin from the New York Times said that the last 40 seconds of that movie are more important than the entire film production of the United States in the 20th century, or something to that avail. I love The Nights of Cabiria. It's a beautiful film. And food, oh man, I gotta say, man, I do love Venezuelan food. I make arepas every morning. They've saved my life. Yes. I mean, well, I usually make like a batch.
I've come to your apartment and you've never cooked for me. You make me
arepas
go around a corner to that bakery and get you stuff and then bring it back.
Exactly. No. Now I'm very much into making my own arepas, and I wish I had Venezuelan cheese. But one of the things I miss the most about Venezuela is fresh food. There was a lot. I mean, I haven't been there in a very long time, so I don't know if it's still the same. But Venezuelan cheeses were delicious, and yeah, I mean, having an arepa like after like a big party night at 3 a.m. somewhere, it was just the most incredible pleasure. So I'm a big fan of Venezuelan food, but also I like Spanish food as well, and I like chocolate, Nutella to be precise.
We'll know what to get you next time I come over.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alberto Ferreras, my beautiful, beautiful friend with a beautiful mind and a beautiful heart and a beautiful soul. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being on the Fritanga podcast.